Today we're reading A Time for Miracles, Chapter 2. When Father arrived home 3 days later, his mood was not greatly improved. "They did it, Rachel. They let that impostor go before the Almighty," he yelled as he came through the door. It was hard to tell his mood because his voice was still angry, but he held a crooked grin on his face. "It serves him right. I warned him. Ha! The old fool has been touched by the finger of the Almighty himself for going into his presence unworthy." "Slow down, Lemuel," Mother reproved quietly. "You're speaking in riddles. Now, what has happened at the temple today?" Father settled into a chair beside the table and nibbled absently at the bread Mother placed before him. "The old reprobate went in to perform the required sacrifices and came out a marked man. Marked, I tell you. Listen to this, Rachel, and you'll see that I was right all along." Father settled into his tale with a certain amount of relish. "I tried one last time to convince the elders of our number to recast the lot, that perhaps we had misread the sign a few days ago, but they would have none of it. No, they said, the lot has been cast, the decision has been made. The Almighty has spoken." What was I to do? I simply reminded them that I had made my objection and proceeded to help with the preparations. We helped Zechariah into the priestly garments, making certain that the fringes were well belled and the rope securely fastened around him. We wanted to be sure to hear his movement about the room and certain that we could retrieve his body should he be struck down for his sinfulness during the course of his service. This is the precaution we would take no matter who had drawn the lot to serve before the mercy seat. Father paused to take a bite of his supper and a quick drink of wine before continuing. "Zechariah was almost pulled out from the tent because he was so long and for several minutes so still that we were afraid for his life. At one point I started to admonish those who were manning the rope to haul away, for surely he had met his demise. But just before the words left my mouth, the rope moved to one side, and we heard the bells once again. Still, Zechariah stayed in the room of the mercy seat. I have timed the activity, Rachel. The service should take no longer than 30 or 40 minutes. There's the story of old Gehazi, who completed the service of atonement before the Almighty in under half an hour. Of course, that story is usually countered with the year that Hiram took 3 hours to complete the atonement. None of us understood why Zechariah was taking so long to complete the sacrificial ceremony. Then, when he finally emerged from the door of the tent, we knew. Zechariah had had an encounter with the Holy One of Israel. I told you, I warned them. Did I not warn them?" Mother replied while refilling Father's cup. "Yes, my husband, you did warn them. So, what's happened? What is this mark that you speak of?" It's obvious, is it not?" Father fairly yelled. The old fool can't speak. He came out of the tent grunting and gesturing like a madman. His eyes were wild with the terror of the Almighty, and he looked more the fool than before. It is beyond me that some of the others have dubbed it a miracle. Disaster, I say. It's a disaster that our chosen priest has been struck dumb in the service of atonement." "What do the others mean when they say it's a miracle, then?" Mother asked. "Why, they claim that Zechariah's encounter with the Holy One is a great sign," Father replied. "They've decided to make Zechariah one of the ruling priests, at least for the rest of our time in Jerusalem. I tell you, his affliction is one that marks him for the sinful creature that he is. I will serve and I will obey, but I will do so under protest." Father was up and pacing now, crumbs from his bread falling to the floor around him. "Time will tell, mark my words. This Zechariah will be shown to be the reprobate that he is. Signs from the angels indeed." Curiosity did its best work in the minds of all the children. Word spread quickly about the priest who couldn't speak. It mattered not whether you agreed with the majority who said the muteness suffered by Zechariah was the result of a miraculous sign, or if you held to the theory espoused by my father, that Zechariah suffered the judgment for his sins, that this new development of his speech, or lack thereof, was proof to be held in common with his wife's barren state, that he was caught up in some unfathomable sin. It mattered not, because Zechariah soon became something of a novelty. He gestured excitedly to all who would pay attention, his hands trying desperately to convey what his tongue could not. Children began to gather to him because we saw some aura, some glow about him that we could not understand, but we could not stay away. Zechariah's demeanor changed toward the children. Whereas before he would smile and pat us on the head as we came to his house, now he would shake our hands, offer small tokens, and with the smaller children he swept them up over his head with the strength of a much younger man. Elizabeth stood in their doorway and smiled a knowing smile, and offering bits of cookie or bread to the children when they could escape the long reach of Zechariah. Though he could no longer read the scriptures aloud or direct the psalm singing, Zechariah became a favorite among others in the community as well. He could not speak, but he received and offered sacrifice with a loving gesture and offered it up to the Almighty with more feeling than any of the other priests in my father's service band. The children spoke of the miracle that took Zechariah's voice, but gave him to us, to the children, in a way the other priests would never condescend to do. Not even my father was as affectionate and giving as was this old priest. Zechariah and Elizabeth became Gran and Pop to all the children of our town. When we returned to our own town, those of us who had been in Jerusalem to witness the miracle related it to all our friends. Father told my brother and sister and me to stay away from the crazy old man. His sin may become yours, Father warned. Would you want to become childless and voiceless for your old age? But we would sneak out as often as we could to play with our friends at the home of Gran and Pop. We found there the error of the miracle. We did not know what drew us there, but we knew we could not stay away. It was not long after our return from Jerusalem that the second miracle began to take shape.